Mick, we've just reloaded with some more film, and when you were in Kobe, did you work as in the medical centre, or did you go out on work parties?
I went out to work right at the word go. There were only two of our blokes were left there as medical orderly. George Blue, the senior corporal, as I mentioned before, and Russell Brooks. Now Russ Brooks had grown up in an orphanage, and he was a little wizened up lad, and he left the orphanage at 18, and we nicknamed him Pop because he looked that way, and he stayed working with George Blues, and George Blues kept an eye on him, and I think the Japs selected him, but it was good in a way because he'd had a terrible upbringing, and he'd been addicted to drink as soon as he left the orphanage, and he was almost a drunk, you see, and he later died in Sydney. He was a drunkard and he committed suicide.
Oh dear.
Yeah. I saw him once down there, and but not long after he committed, within 3 months he committed suicide.
And what work did you do?
Well, we went out to the shipyards as a group, and I forget how many there were. There were 400 all told, so there were some cooks and officers of Dutch and Australian nationality stayed behind, and different people stayed, not too many because they wanted as many working as possible. And I was sort of in a roving sort of a job, whereas some of them were put in, one group's name was ONU, UNYU, a little tag, and our number was on it, but I had no group on mine. But ONU was sort of a transport group within the shipyard. Oh, pardon me. And or they work in different places. My first job went as a dogman on one of those great big travelling cranes. No, I went first working on tugboats. Chick Price, a young signal bloke from Victoria. Neil Fisher, a young field ambulance bloke from Bendemeer on the New England, from New South Wales. Paul Mueller, a Dutch Javanese fellow, my best mate, and myself. And we had a boss there, Sakamoto, a little Jap he was, but you could have a laugh and a joke with him, but you kept working. And there were young Japanese working there with us, and we didn't have much to do with him, but anyhow, we worked on tugboats to start with. And then I got a job, they shifted me as a dogman for on a travelling crane up and down the side of the ship, loading the steel plates up on the decks and that. Just excuse me for a moment, I've got a bit of a dry throat.
No, thank you.
Right?
Yep.
Yes, we're working on the tugboats there. They were ocean-going things, and there was a lot of woodwork on there, as well as metal. You know, they're a bit short on metal in those days. And nearby there was a wharf, and all the rubbish from the shipyard used to be brought down to there, and the barges would be in underneath the edge of the wharf, and in between working on the boat we'd shovel all that stuff into the tugboat, into the rubbish boats. They had a shaped bottom where they used to go out, dump it out at sea outside the breakwater. So they sent me around as a dogman then on one of these travelling cranes, and that way us blokes who were working on them could tell exactly where on the ship they went, because in the top right hand corner of the plate there was Japanese writing, and we got to understand the symbols, and we'd know whether they were front or rear or where they had to go, and it was quite easy. But the only thing was, in wet weather the cables were underground and they were leaking, and you'd be walking along and they'd be all wet, the ground, suddenly you'd leap in the air, you wouldn't know where to leap, you'd be getting electrocuted from these cables.
Yeah.
Oh, an awful feeling. And you'd try to jump somewhere where it looked a bit drier, but anyhow, they're only patchy, you know, but it hurt like hell what had happened. But there were massive amounts of electricity in the cables, But fortunately no one was electrocuted, but we got a few shocks.
Yes. One question I had, when you would go from your camp to the shipyards, or did you go by tram, or what sort of, how did you get there?
We marched from the camp to the Takatoa Mishi station, about, that could be 3/4 of a mile, I suppose. I always say half or 3/4, but and then we got on an electric train. There was 10 minutes down from Takatoa Mishi to the central electric station. There was one place in between Nagata, and there was a big crematorium there which was put in use later on when the bombing started. And we marched from that electric station down to the shipyard, which would be probably a mile. And that was the Kawasaki Shipbuilding Company. Now that had been, before the war, is reputed to be the 8th biggest shipyard in the world. It was a big place. And there was an aircraft carrier, there was tugboats, aircraft carrier, oil tankers, and what else were being made there? There was a big dry dock, and there was a submarine pens for the midget submarines. So it was and going back the other way, I never got down that way much because it's such a big yard, but the blokes are spread out all over that shipyard. But that was the job I was doing there. But then after a while I was shifted from there, and I went around with a Pommy corporal out of the RAF, Sid Ward, a Dutchman, Case Bolikoff. His name was Cornelius Adrianus Bolikoff, white Dutchman. And then there was a Dutch Japanese fellow. He was a Dutch army bloke, the Stip Heinen. Now they were the 4 in the gang, and we were, I must get the right wording here, we were disposing all the ash from the boiler room that supplied the compressed air for the riveting guns and all that for the shipyard. And there was like a big concrete walled trough with a railway line in the centre, a little narrow railway line, and the Japs used to run the little trolley out and tip it sideways, tip the ash, and we'd shovel it into the barges over the edge of the wharf. And that, of a morning, when we'd go of a morning, that wall-in area, the ash would be up as high as that. The railway line was about that high, and the ash would be piled up on either side. The full length of that, about 20 metres, there'd be about 20 tonnes of ash, and we'd shovel that into those barges each day. And we'd have it empty at night, except for a little bit here and there which kept coming out. And the next morning it'd be filled, and the coal bins were on the outside of that, where they brought the coal in on barges and had it there. So we would start on the edge and we'd be shoveling it in straight into the barge. Then the next lot we'd be throwing it a bit further. Then the next lot we'd be throwing it to there and then in. And in the end we were shoveling it. About 8 different times we shovelled it during the day before we got it into the barge.
Finally got it in there. Now, you still, was this still at the Kawasaki?
Yes, that's the Kawasaki.
Now, who was feeding you? The company or the army?
The company was supposed to be feeding us, and when we first went there to that camp at Takatoa Mishi, there was a big Jap bloke there named Suzuki. Now, he was American Japanese, spoke with an American accent, no Japanese accent. He said, "Oh, you guys will be well fed, you'll be looked after, where you're going to work." And we never saw that bloke that owned that shipyard, or the principal of it, until they fed us some rotten food once, and about 3/4 of the fellas fell down in the street going home from work, and they were being carried, and anyhow they brought this bloke in then, and it improved for about 5 minutes.